And he was the owner. So did you put a clean out in there? Wow.
So
Okay,
if they're
so
here to
that's
speak, maybe
makes
not need
it
to
much
take
better.
water. So, we did that. We're kind of hoping if there is a problem, it's on the side. So
Well, that could be.
well, it may be. In all seriousness, it may be. So we'll do a little more diagnostic work to figure that out, but it was a shitty Saturday. Yeah.
Did you finally make up, Miss Kimberly?
Oh,
People in their
Okay,
neighbors.
never mind.
Yeah, we always get
sorry.
I got sidetracked with the
I
thermometer.
thought you'd like that one.
Mhm.
I'm so out of
I
it.
did too.
Oh, we got to go. Okay.
Presentation. Now.
You guys ready?
All set?
Okay, you're going to call to order the Board of Adjustment today, Wednesday, January 27th at 7 PM. Roll call.
Mr. Rabowski,
Here.
Ms. Turner,
Present.
Mr. Burris,
Here.
Mr. Eisner,
Here.
Ms. Rich,
Here.
Mr. Davis, and Ms. Simon are on call. In the,
Okay. So we are going to go to our attorney for some legal wisdom.
Oh, well, that's lovely. Thank you. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Board of Adjustment acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any members of the board wishing to disclose any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest this evening? If anyone wishing to speak this evening could please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in. Anyone who's an applicant and wishes to speak, stand and raise your right hand. Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
So sworn.
Okay, so we're going to go to application 20-144, variance to reduce the required side yard setbacks, location 20 Reed Street.
And Mr. Chairman, are we taking number 3 and moving that to the end of the meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
No worries.
We're all cool with the election at the end, right?
Oh.
Good?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you for that. So yes, applicant. So let's go to the city staff.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay. The subject property is outlined here in yellow on the screen. It is zoned RM, which is residential multifamily. Majority of the surrounding zoning is also RM, but there is some general business to the north. And then just to the east is the SAP, which is our special area plan district. The applicants are here today requesting a reduction in the side setbacks. They are proposing to construct a small addition onto one of the structures on the property, as well as construct a new carport. The addition is proposed to be set back 6 feet from the east property line, and the carport is proposed to be set back 8 feet from the west property line. In the RM zoning district for multifamily use properties, the minimum side setback is 20 feet. This is a look at the existing lot layout. There are 3 structures on the property. There is an existing single-family residence, which is the light blue shape on the screen towards the front of the property. There is an existing detached garage, which is the dark blue square on the screen. And then there is a building behind the garage, which is where there are 2 additional dwelling units. So although this is not set up like a typical multifamily property, because there are a total of 3 units on the property, that's why we consider it multifamily use. Again, the applicants are proposing an addition onto the back side of the existing single-family structure. They are proposing the side setback to match the existing structure's setback, which is 6 feet from the east property line. And then they're also proposing to attach a new carport to the front of the existing garage. It again will match the existing setback of the garage, and it's approximately 8 feet from the west property line. As I mentioned, this property is considered multifamily use. In the RM zoning district, there are different side setback standards depending on the use of the property. So for multifamily use, that's where the 20-foot side setback minimum comes into play. For comparison, for a single family use in the same zoning district, the side setback is only 5 feet. This property is also located within our historic district. The single-family residence is considered a contributing structure according to the Florida Master Site File. The proposed modifications to the site went to the Historic Preservation Board back in October for review. The board is required to consider some historic guidelines when looking at applications and modifications to historic properties. The 3 here that I have shown on the screen are pertinent to this application, and those are the height and width of any proposed alteration or new construction shall be consistent with that of adjacent contributing structures. The next is additions to historic structures shall be cited in order to make the principal structure still predominating, and additions should be located to the rear. And the last is the scale and massing of the addition shall be secondary to the principal structure. The Historic Preservation Board did determine that all the historic guidelines were met, and they did issue certificate of approval, which is why this is now here before you today to seek the side setback variance. This is just an overview of your review standards, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. I'm going to go to the vice chair first. Do you have any questions for staff?
Yes, thank you. The SAP, the special area district that you were saying was just to the east, I'm assuming that is the area that is shaded in gray on the image here. The color, that one.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so what exactly is a special area district?
This is a special area of our downtown Tarpon Springs. It really encompasses downtown, the community redevelopment area, as well as the sponge docks. That area has a special set of essentially zoning standards. It falls underneath our regulations of the SMART code. So it follows some different development standards than typical zoning districts do elsewhere in the city.
Mm-hmm. But there still is like one little property just to the east of the applicant property that's still in the multifamily.
Yes.
Thank you for that clarification. And I had another question, and I have a feeling my fellow board members may be curious about this. So it was actually on the other colorful picture that you had, that was the floor plan of, you wanted to, that one, thank you. Yes, where the multifamily has a 20-foot minimum setback, but the single family only has a 5. So if this was, which of course this isn't, I understand the rationale why it's considered a multifamily with that 2-unit, I guess you'd call it an in-law suite or, unit back in the corner. What is the rationale for such a difference of the setbacks of a 20-foot versus a 5-foot?
So typically with multifamily, there's an expectation that there is a greater impact to surrounding properties. You may have more parking, there might be larger buildings on the site. So the additional setback, because there are allowances for single family in that district, it just provides additional buffer between properties.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
I'm good right now.
Hang on. Joanne?
No, I don't have any.
Oh, Mr. Boris?
No, nothing on this.
Mr. Eisner?
Thank you. So my question is this case exactly points to, seeing it's a family, there is what it looks like a lot on this property as is, isn't there?
I'm sorry.
A lot of building right now on the property.
So the three, there are, if I can move this away from here. The shapes that I have drawn here, the light blue, the dark blue, and the yellow color, those are the existing structures on the property.
Okay, so my question is, it was presented as the Heritage Preservation Board approved this, but they approved it with a condition too that says it has to meet zoning dimensional.
So that's what's bringing it here to the board today, because it's unable to meet the side setbacks.
Right.
And also basically fall underneath the purview that they reviewed. So the Historic Preservation Board reviewed these applications for compatibility with their historic guidelines. They don't necessarily have purview over setbacks. So what they did is they looked at this application in comparison to those guidelines to make their decision. The zoning, typically for those types of approvals, those as a condition that's added to it. So if there's anything that they can't meet in the zoning district, that's what then brings it before you guys today.
So in other words, just because it was presented as it was approved, and the way I'm reading it, it's not really approved. It's approved, allowing us to do more of an approval than just their approval is more cosmetic, is what I'm trying to say. Ours is more for setback. My other question that I have is for the extension of the carport. It says that it's to be lower than the garage roof. Is that the peak part or is that the low part of the roof? Which part are we referring to?
I would defer to the applicant to describe how that's constructed. The Historic Preservation Board, one of their reasons behind the carport being compatible with the historic guidelines was that it was to remain open and not enclosed, but it was going to be attached, from what we understand, to the building. So I would defer to the applicant.
Okay.
Okay.
And one other question, if I may, I want to make sure I'm correct in my assumption here that it looks like this is a double lot.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go to the applicant. Do we have the applicant online or in the house?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Larson?
Yes, hi.
All right, well, this is your moment.
Before you begin, Mr. Larson, might I please swear you in?
Okay.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
So talk about
Where in all of them?
the garage and the carport.
I was going to wait for the
They're
question.
waiting for you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I supposed to talk now?
Yes, sir. If you
I'm
have
sorry.
anything to
Yeah, so
present.
Okay, the garage has a hip roof on it now, and we're going to actually just continue the hip. It's drawn that it doesn't drop down lower or anything. It just continues out and becomes one. And it's in the same ridge line, if that helps.
Okay, Mr. Eisner, did you have further question about that?
Not about that, no.
Vice Chair? Any questions for the applicant?
I know I probably not about the carport itself. How is, and I'm assuming that, I'm seeing the 2 units in the back, which seem relatively compact, probably about a little under 500 square feet per unit. Is this carport, this is where we're looking to have some parking for your tenants?
No, actually, the tenants park on the street. It was just to provide some shade in the driveway.
So it's essentially what
Covered.
it's
It'd be covered parking for ourselves, basically.
understood. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's an existing, the driveway itself is existing. You're just looking to make
Yes.
the carport to be covered. Understood.
That's-
Okay, thank you.
That's,
Mr. Boris, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
How about
No
you,
problem
Joanne?
with it.
You good?
No questions.
I still have questions, but not about that.
Well, go ahead.
Thank you. My question that I would have to ask is, we have 5 criteria, and criteria 3 has that the literal enforcement of the requirements of the City of Tarpon Springs Comprehensive Land Development Code would have the effect of denying the applicant of reasonable use of the property. So it's hard for me to go ahead and pass a variance because you have reasonable use of the property. You have a house there, you have a garage there, you have a 2-unit. So how can I get past number 3 to pass a variance when right now you have reasonable use of the property?
We're being held standards of-
yeah, we're being held to standards of something that's not like what's all around us. That's the one thing that comes to my mind. I mean, I guess because it's a double lot, it falls into that multi-family. I mean, but we're in a residential area here. We're not apartments. It's like, it's our home and a garage, and there is that mother-in-law type building that was on here originally. I mean, that's all I got.
Okay.
So, and maybe this is a question maybe for our council, because the applicant bringing up that, it's a double lot since, the same property owner, since the same applicant owns both properties, it's being held to the multifamily use with that 20-foot setback. If 2 different people owned, if one person owned the lot where the garage and units are, and then someone else owned the lot with the home on it,
It would be 5.
it would be 5. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, but that's irrelevant to this application. Because the fact is, the evidence that you have is that it's not 2 separate properties. It is one single property and is deemed to be a multifamily use due to the fact that there are 3 units on the property.
So perhaps the city staff could enlighten us as how they consider number 3 condition being met.
Sure. So staff is of the opinion that the criteria is met. Within this specific language of the decision criteria, it talks about presence within a historic district or having historic structures on a property is considered a special or a unique condition for a property. Typically for historic properties, it's challenging for them to meet modern day setbacks. There's also, guidelines for historic structures when they make alterations that requires additions to be to the rear of structures as well as meet the full width of structures. So those are all considerations that we took in from a staff's perspective for that criteria.
Mr. Eisner.
Hearing what you just said, none of that though is on the criteria that we have to judge by.
So there is in the land development code, the criteria that's in your staff report is a condensed version of the criteria. There are some subpoints specific to criteria 1 that talks about historic properties language, and I can find that language for you and read you this. Actually, I think I used it in the staff report.
I was going to say, I have it here
Okay,
too.
perfect.
Where
Please.
215.02 subsection B1 B says that, so the Board of Adjustment shall grant no variance unless all the following standards are met and are proven by competent substantial evidence. 1 is the need for the requested variance arises of the physical surroundings, etc. Subsection B says location of the property in the historic district within the city may also be considered as a unique physical condition. However, any variance applied for when the historic district, within the historic district shall be found to be compatible with the character of the properties within that district before any variance may be granted. And that is why, I believe why, and I'll defer to Ally on this, in the staff report, there are those recommendations from the Historic Preservation Board as to why they said that the addition had to be in the back of the property and that kind of thing. So
Sometimes you got to read the fine print, Mr. Eisner.
I'm just curious why we don't have the fine print in front of us. to
I
make
believe
that
it's
decision.
included in the staff report.
That goes along with what that's,
Yeah, like we're already
Yeah.
out of compliance.
yeah.
Questions of the applicant?
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you.
But if you have anything else to present, sir,
Oh,
we're happy to.
You know, well, I don't know. You know, it's just the house was built out of compliance already, and I don't, with the setbacks encroaching. So,
We're
Right.
just trying to all the setbacks.
yeah.
Okay.
I guess I'm finished.
Yeah, that's good.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might,
Please.
to the vice chair's point earlier with the hypothetical with regard to the double lot versus the single lot, I would also just add, when you're talking about reasonable use of the property, to Mr. Eisner's point, it would be reasonable use of the property and similar properties within the historic district. So you would be looking at literal enforcement for multifamily homes within the historic preservation district.
I'm good with that.
All right. So we're going to ask for public comment now. Do we have any emails on this item?
No.
Okay. Anybody online or in the audience that would like to speak on this item? If you're online, please raise your hand at this time. Mr. Jump. Anybody?
We do not have any raised hands at this time.
Thank you, sir. So now, I guess we're going to go for a motion.
Motion to approve?
I have a motion to second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Ms. Ritt,
Approve.
Mr. Eisner,
Approve?
Mr. Burris,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Approve.
Mr. Rabowski.
Yes. Okay, sir, congratulations. You have 2 years. Enjoy.
Go Bucks. Go Bucks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to, it appears, application 20-158, variance to increase the maximum fence height. Location 1029 Rose Tree Lane. Go to the staff report, please.
All right, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. This property is located off of Rose Tree Lane. Again, it's outlined here in yellow. This property, as well as all surrounding property, is located within the R100 zoning district, which is a single-family residential district. Again, the applicants are here today requesting a variance to allow a fence to be a total of 8 feet in height. Within residential districts, the Land Development Code restricts the maximum height to be only 6 feet. They are proposing to add a 2-foot extension onto the top of an existing fence that's located on their rear property line. This is a closer look at the property. There's a single-family residence built on the property right now. The fence, again, is only along the rear property line, which is the blue line here on the screen. There is a 10-foot wide drainage easement along the rear of the property, as well as a portion of a 50-foot wide drainage easement to the west side of the property. At the time this house was constructed, which was back in 2017, they were required to fill and elevate the property in order to address some existing drainage and stormwater issues on the property, as well as surrounding properties. So this property sits approximately 2 feet higher than some surrounding properties, or I'm sorry, it's just under 5 feet higher than surrounding properties. This results in a swale being located in both of these easements. The one along the rear side basically has a 2-foot drop from the finished grade of the property down to the rear property line. This image here on the screen is just looking at the rear property line of the subject property. You can kind of just see where the property begins to slope down towards those trees, and the fence is located right now just on the other side of those trees. Again, these are your review standards, and I can answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions for the staff? Vice Chair.
Thank you. Are there, so you said that there was a fence behind those trees. Thank you for clarifying that because we wouldn't have known from these images. So with that, are there any fences on the sides of the property currently?
Yes, I believe there's one on the east side. I'll defer to the applicant to verify that, but this application is only to increase the height along that rear property line.
Okay.
Please, Joanne.
We were handed the email. Can I ask a question about that at this point to you or no?
I'm going to defer to our counsel.
Oh, you can ask the question. That's fine.
Sure.
There was a front and back, and on one of the sides, it talked about that the person thought there was a 10-foot fence already, and then it was clarified later, no, it was already 8. Is the 8-foot fence that we're being asked for a variance currently an 8-foot fence?
So from what I understand, the addition was added to the top of the fence, but then they became aware that they needed to get approval to do so. So that extension was removed so they could go through this process. And again, I'll defer to the applicant to talk to the history of that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Boris, any questions?
No, not particularly on this.
Mr. Eisner.
My questions would be for the applicant.
Okay. Vice Chair, you good?
Sir.
Okay. Applicant, are you present in the audience or online, Mr. Adam Vallette?
I am online.
Okay, sir, if you have anything to present, we're ready to hear it.
And before you begin, if I might be able to swear you in, please. Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
So sworn. And if you have a presentation, you can certainly make it now.
Okay, so yeah, the pictures that you guys see there are kind of tough to see the fence. It was an angle shot that kind of showed the decline of the rear swale. Actually, and there are some other pictures that I did send in a few months ago of the being in the back of the house, staring to the back, which is north of the property. It's a clear shot all the way through to the rear neighbor's backyard, their kitchen, and their bathroom. They can see it clear as day in. The trees are actually not that wide. It's just the angle that you see. If it was a straight shot, which there are some pictures of that as well, it's clear as day right through the trees. That fence right there is when we actually shot the elevation from the bottom of that fence to the into our home, it's pretty much acting as a 4-foot fence versus a 6-foot fence. That's why we're asking to apply. The fence was never 8 feet. It was just a add-on, just to give us some privacy, because at night you can see right into our back windows and right into our doors into our home. And it's very uncomfortable because behind us, it is a rental property. So there are a lot of different individuals that come in and out of that property.
Okay, Vice Chair, you had a question of the applicant.
Yes. So thank you for being here virtually tonight, sir.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, so there currently is a fence, and I understand that you had made it taller and then realized that you needed the variance and everything for it. So you took it down, and here we are basically looking to see if you can put it back up. Am I correct in
Yes,
that?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so what you currently have now, how tall is the fence itself?
The fence itself is 6 feet from the bottom of the swale to the top of the fence. The fence itself is only 6 feet.
Right, so the fence itself is 6 feet. What you can see from, I guess what I would call ground level, like looking at the photo here that has your backyard, nice paver slab, it's sort of like, where your property naturally is, to the top of the fence. That's what you're saying is only about 4 feet, because you've lost 2 feet swale.
Correct. So the increase from the bottom of that fence we shot is about 2 feet 5 inches to be exact. So then once you're inside the house, it's another foot because the house is up another 1.5 feet. So really, honestly, when you're in the house, it's almost like a 3-foot fence.
Okay. So you're looking to make it an additional 2 feet?
Yeah. Well,
But it-
what I had on there before was just an extension that was only a little over 1.75 feet. It wasn't that much. It was under an 8-foot. It was just an extension that we thought you buy them at Home Depot and you can just put them up and get somewhat of some privacy because we have none.
Right. And do you have, as you heard in our discussion earlier, do you have any of the side fences up?
The sides are fine. To the east of us, we have a bunch of trees that we put in when we first built the house, so it's kind of covered up pretty well. And there's no windows on the east side of the house, so that doesn't really bother us. On the west side, there's a retention pond that splits us and the other neighbors, so there's no fence over there. It's not a problem. It's just the rear, because the setback of our home is 30 feet, so we're really honestly in the backyard of the neighbor to the north of us. We're very close.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Ritter, another question? No? Mr. Boris?
No.
Mr. Eisner?
So I'm a little confused on this. In the email that we have something that says it's an 8-foot fence, and then we have something that says it's a 6-foot fence with 2-foot addition. Are you saying that there is nothing there now? There's a 6-foot fence there now, or there's a 6-foot fence with a 2-foot extension on it?
Yes. So basically, there's a 6-foot fence in there. I had a 2-foot extension on top of that 6 feet. The neighbor behind me called code enforcement saying I didn't apply for the variance. So that's why we took the 2-foot section down. It's back to a 6-foot. It's always been a 6-foot. Just the extension was put on for the privacy.
And if the 2-foot extension was put back, then the visible, or I guess what you would say functional height of the fence would still be in that 6-foot or under height. Am I correct?
If I put the 2-foot extension back on top of the 6, it would be that 8-foot fence total.
Right. But at least 2 feet of that is lost to the swale.
Correct. Over 2 feet.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Eisner?
Yes, so my other question, when you had this fence up at around 8 foot, did that give you privacy?
It did. It was fantastic. And then we got code enforcement called on us and we had to take it down. It was a very uncomfortable Christmas.
And since your neighbor, this was back, I believe, in
June.
July.
Correct.
So when actually did you take it down?
When I had to take it down in July because code enforcement had to come out and sign off on it. So it was down within, I would say, a couple of months, I believe. I had a little family issue. I know we had a little bit extension put on taking it down. But I can't remember exact time when that was taken down, but it was within a couple of months. They gave me a deadline of when it had to come down. And that's what we did. And it was checked out by Beth Hughes, and she came out and approved it, but it was taken down.
So what would you think that the neighbor would be complaining about an 8-foot fence if there's a swale there where 2 feet are being absorbed? I mean, why would he be complaining about that? Well,
That's the exact question I had for him. He said, because I didn't go through the variance process. That was the exact words.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Boris?
Yes. How secure is that fence that you're adding on top, the 2 feet?
It's very secure. It's very, very secure. It's actually, it's bolted into the existing 4x4s and then also into the top of the 2x2 as well. It's not going anywhere. at all. It was a pain to take down, and it is very, very secured. I mean, I would, if there's any kind of storm, the whole fence is going before that would go. I mean, there's so many things in the neighbor's property that I'd be more worried about than the fence.
Okay, the 2x4s on the existing fence are 6 feet, the height of the fence, correct?
Correct.
The-
Yep.
What would you do for the rest of it, the other 2 feet? What kind of an extension you're adding to that, or does it have one?
I'm sorry, say that question one more time.
The existing 4x4 is 6 feet, correct?
Correct.
Okay, the additional 2 feet, what kind of an extension of 4x4 they're going to have? What kind of security they're going to have?
So, yep. So the extension would have a 2x4 that is actually bolted to the actual extension, then bolts into the 4x4 itself. And that 4x4 is in the ground by, I think, 2 feet. It's an 8-foot 4x4. We had the fence put in.
So there is an
So it will.
extension of a 4x4 on the existing one.
So it would be basically bolted to that 4x4 for the actual stability and the structure of it.
That's my question.
It's not going anywhere.
Okay, any other questions of the applicant?
Yeah, I do.
Please.
My question is similar to what was just asked. They make 8-foot fences. So have you considered putting up one continuous 8-foot fence with an existing 4x4 post that would, secure it rather than putting a 2-foot extension on top of a 6-foot fence? Because in the email that I'm reading, your neighbor is concerned that in the event of a hurricane or high winds, that however this has been jury rigged, it might come off and be hitting his house, from what I'm reading. And I just don't know if that's safe.
Understood. I would say the reason why that we would not put an 8-foot fence in, because it's about $4,000 to put the 8-foot fence in. I have 135 feet of fence line that would have to go in. And to be honest with you, the tying it into everything else, the actual addition is only a foot that I have in there. We applied for the 2 feet, but it's only going to be a foot. That being any different structural wise than what the 6 foot, you're talking about 7 feet. It's not going to be any different than a 6 foot. You're talking about a foot and a quarter difference, not the full 8 feet. I already have the extension pieces already built from when I had to take it down. So as a storm or an issue like that, I don't foresee an issue at all with it because of the structure not being built that much higher than what existing is now. If it was 12 feet, absolutely. But we're just talking about a little over a foot, 12 inches.
And to go off of what Mr. Eisner was saying, so when code enforcement came, as they were called, and measured and said you had to take it down, was there any information or reporting from code enforcement that your extension was not structurally sound or in compliance from that? Was the height the only issue?
No, they didn't have any issue with it at all. They actually kind of laughed about it because they said they couldn't believe that you got called on because it was so minimal of what the actual issue was. I mean, we're only talking a little over a foot. They just said, go apply for the variance and you shouldn't have an issue. I said, yes, ma'am, that's what we'll do. And hopefully get some privacy back.
Thank you.
Mr. Boris. I'm sorry, Mr. Eisner.
So this question is for legal. Do we have any obligation or do we have any liability if we approve this variance and this particular piece does at some point come flying off? I mean, is there any?
Well, a couple different things. First of all, the board as it sits is not the city. So the Board of Adjustment doesn't have any liability for personal property or structures on a citizen's real property. So to answer your question from a legal point of view, if you grant a variance for an 8-foot fence, however they choose to erect an 8-foot fence, as long as it's properly permitted and they meet the height requirements, that's it. That's all you're doing. There's no liability of this board whatsoever from a negligence perspective, period.
Okay.
And frankly, to your point, just to take it one step further, while I appreciate the neighbors' concerns with regard to becoming a projectile, that's not really part of your criteria. You know, we've had that conversation about safety before, so.
Thank you for the
So-
clarification.
A follow-up
Ms. Rich,
question. Thank
please.
you. A follow-up question to that, because I'm not as familiar with the permitting process. Do all fences in the city require a permitting process, and then would extensions, then he have to go through a permitting process with this?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, sir, do you have any last words before we go to public comment? That's you.
Mr. Village.
Yes. Can you hear me, sir?
I can now, yes.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, if you have anything left to say, we'd love to hear it. Otherwise, we're going to go to public comment.
No, the only thing I'd like to say is, thank you for the opportunity. I hope we can figure something out. It's just, we'd like to be a little bit more comfortable, my family in our home, with a little bit of privacy, since, we built this home and have beautiful windows. Like, I have to keep them all closed. And that would help tremendously to have a little bit more privacy.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir.
So we're going to go to public comment. First, we're going to start with this email that I know we have. Would you feel comfortable reading this into the record?
I'm comfortable if you'd like me to.
That would be great.
To whom it may concern. Oh, Greg DeCare wrote this email. To whom it may concern, I am writing this email to request that this variance be denied. I received a notice of public hearing for the issue and will make every attempt to be present at this meeting. If, however, I am not able to be present, I want to be on the record to object this variance request. I am concerned about the natural sunlight being blocked, unwanted shadows being cast, and southerly breeze or blocking thereof, any natural flow of wind or breeze. Also of concern are hurricane force winds potentially causing this fence to become projectiles, putting people and property in harm's way. An additional concern is that if granted, this variance will be like death and taxes. It's permanent. If it isn't an eyesore, at the very least, that is unacceptable to me and will forever be irreversible. I have offered my rear neighbor, Mr. Villette, several remedies to which he agreed, but now it appears has changed his mind. In my opinion, this gentleman has made choices that make his fence a last resort for his request for privacy. He could have chosen more appropriate trees that provide a visual barrier for his privacy. He could erect a screened enclosure with Florida glass for his proposed back deck for his privacy. He chose to build a new home under current building codes that have elevation requirements deeming the first floor uninhabitable. Just how much privacy does a person expect to get on a quarter-acre lot with an elevated floor plan? These are his choices. Now he wants his choices to be the potential burden on neighbors. I think not. Thank you. Sincerely, Greg DeCare, Connecticut Road.
Thank you, Kim. Are there any other emails?
No.
Okay. So I guess we're going to go to the audience. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this issue? Anyone in cyberspace out there that would like to speak?
If anyone would like to speak on this issue, please raise your hand and you'll be allowed in to talk. And we do have a raised hand.
Oh, hold on. Oh, we do.
I'm actually the applicant myself.
I was referring to an attendee.
Oh,
Yeah.
So, sir, if you could state your name and address for the record.
It's Greg DeCare. I'm the owner of the property at 1021 Connecticut Road.
Okay, normally when we have an email read, we don't give the opportunity for the for people to do public comment, but since we didn't check in for you first. I'm open to hearing from this man if you are all open to hearing. Okay.
And
You
from
got-
a legal perspective, he has the opportunity, since he's technically an affected party.
Affected party.
He can question the applicant.
Understood. And
Mr.
we're going to
Dick-
give him up to a maximum of 10 minutes. Does that sound good? Do we need to vote on that, or do
I
we need?
think before you guys have said 5, but 5 or 10, whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
But Mr. DeCare, I cannot see you, so if I could just get your word, do you swear from the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. And I would just say, Mr. DeCare, anything in addition to your email that you would like this board to hear?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
I've discussed this issue several times with Mr. Vallette, and I'm sympathetic to his issues and have agreed to a willingness for a compromise, a remedy on his behalf, being a privacy screen. This would alleviate any direct sight lines in front of his back door or his new lanai, which he may or may not decide to enclose. And that's, the fact that I object to the variance because, in principle, we had somewhat of a compromise. In my opinion, interpretations of the review standards, are subjective, especially as they refer to the subject property. The standard one is the city did not allow Mr. Vallette to increase the height of the fence at the time this lot was backfilled when he pulled the permit to get that lot backfilled. And so I question why they would allow it now. And that's his own comment that they would not allow him to do that. And also I believe that also is one of the standards is prior knowledge. And that's, in my opinion, that he had prior knowledge that it was going to be an issue. If the city required this lot to be a higher elevation, and according to the documents, it was higher by 4 feet 8 inches. Again, when you drive down the street on Rose Tree, you see his house is quite elevated compared to the properties on the east and west sides. And that's also relevant to my property. So it's quite high. But I still believe that's prior knowledge with the swales and things like that, with the retention pond that's there. That's what I would consider alleviates the unique situation. And that's, I believe, in one of the standards, I believe standard 1. This necessarily wasn't a problem created by, anything other than the floodplain. I believe in order to pull a permit, he had to be at the base flood elevation plus 1 foot to even put the slab there. But it's higher than the neighbors on either side of him and me as well. So I just think that choice to build in a floodplain was something that might invalidate standard 2. And that's the special circumstance. Also, the request, I think, for the extension, which was installed previously and which I called code enforcement on, was installed without a permit, and it has reappeared. And he's got several, 4 sections, maybe 5, that he's installed. And I agreed with Mr. Ouellette that we would let the dust settle over the holidays, and then we'd pick this situation up again. And that's when I received the public hearing notice. The extension is attached to 2x4s, not 4x4s. That's a defect in the permit process for a fence, period. So I question why the city would allow a variance for a fence that doesn't even meet code, let alone not knowing what fasteners are used, if he's using bolts, if he's using drywall screws. I don't know. That's why a permit is important, so that we can get the city out to inspect it to make sure that it meets code. And also, they refer to in the documentation what they call sight lines from the subject property. I don't know if that person, whoever did that inspection on site, if they looked at the sight lines from my property. And I believe that that's going to cause me injury. Again, he's already had this fence up and it is unsightly. These trees that he built, they're beautiful. They could have been a little bit closer, but they were immature when he put them in. Those trees are going to grow wider and wider, and eventually there will be a remedy in and of itself. If you look back, and if someone did go out and look at the site from my perspective on my property, they would see that there is no other fence taller than 6 feet all the way down the back of the block in this swale. Like I said, he's had several remedies. He remedied the east side with plants. He could have easily done that. And again, I've agreed to work with him. I'm sympathetic, but I would request that the variance be denied. He's probably going to enclose his lanai. You can put Florida glass up as a remedy to the entrance for the sight lines, but the sight lines are going to greatly affect, from our property at the same type of what they're calling subject property in the sight lines they're talking about are going to be affected. I see no reason why a retention pond needs a privacy fence. And I have a shed on the property, and when the extension was put on, it was as tall as the walls and encroached up over the height of the walls of the shed, which is on a 5-foot setback. So I know the setback that he has is an issue. And like I said, I am sympathetic. I agreed for him to put 3 panels up right adjacent to his lanai and the entryway, the means of egress. But if it were going to happen, he would have to replace those panels with an 8-foot fence, 8-foot 4x4s, and attached properly and permitted and inspected. So I'm just asking that it be denied. I think we had an agreement already. I think he had prior knowledge of the issue. And so I think some of the standards have not been met to allow this variance to be approved. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Mr. Eisner of the affected party.
Mr. DeCare, you just stated that the fence is currently up.
It is.
Did you say that the fence, the 2-foot extension is still currently up?
He put it up before the holidays, took it down when I made the code violation request, and then he put it back up after that. And so it is up, and there's at least 4 panels, and that also is, more than the panels that I agreed to. But yes, it's still up.
Currently, right now, as we speak, you're saying it's up.
I didn't go by the property today. I was there on Monday, and it was up.
Well,
Only 4 panels, so, but not the full length of the property line, but 4 panels that are blocking those sight lines. And this is the panels that we agreed to compromise on. And I understand his issue, and I agreed to work with him on it. But when I saw the variance, I'm like, okay, he must have changed his mind. So I don't like the idea of having the fence over the entire fence line. It's these measurements, these sight lines are, something that needs to be inspected because.
Okay, do we have any other questions, Mr. DeCare?
I have a.
Yes,
question.
Mr. Burris, please.
Do you have an objection to those 4 panels that he's going to put up, if that's what it ends up to be?
I agreed with Mr. Villette that he could put panels up, and then I would agree to 3 panels as a privacy screen that would block his lanai and his means of egress of his property, of his home. And I don't have a problem allowing him to put 25 feet, which is 3 panels of 8-foot fence up, to give him that privacy. But if I don't object to the variance, then he can put the fence up on the entire length of the property line. which includes a big portion of that retention pond. And I've owned the property since 96, and I've always had sight lines over that retention pond onto the next block.
I see your point for safety, 8 feet. Thank you.
Okay. Joanne, no. So, sir, I'm looking at a picture here, and it looks directly behind this man's property. There's a small shed. Is that your property?
Yes, sir.
And then there's some kind of a bush or a tree next to that?
Yes.
And then a bigger tree to the left of that?
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So I wish that we did have a picture of, and I wish you had sent us a picture of what you're talking about, because it does not seem possible that you could see his fence with all of these objects in the way of this man's fence. These things would be blocking whatever his fence would. I'm confused as to how you see his fence as an eyesore when there's a tree and a bush and a building blocking the fence itself. Is that correct?
Well,
how much are you seeing of this fence?
Well, the shed blocks, probably a couple of panels. The other tree is higher. So, and I've recently trimmed it. The other tree that you're talking about is on the property line to my neighbor to the west. It's absolutely huge and it's much taller. But when you look at this fence, you can see when you're sitting on the back patio, you can see his back door. And so, I'm saying that you can see it. Now, the trees that he put there, they're like an evergreen, but they're too far apart and too immature to block the view. So he has put the fence up, and this is where all this started. You can see the fence. The fence is quite obvious, really. And it says that, someone went out there and looked at these sight lines from the subject property, I question who that might have been, because they certainly didn't look at it from my, subject property sight lines.
Well, sir, it just seems to me that goes both ways. I mean, you could plant something there to block this man's fence if you don't like the way it looks, right?
Well, I have let the trees overgrow, but there's not one tree on the sight line between, say, the kitchen window and his rear door. There is no tree in that immediate sight line. But he took care of his problem on the east side. I don't understand why he didn't just do it on the backside too. He has that as a remedy.
Right. And this is not necessarily part of our purview, but I'm simply saying that I believe you also have options. If we were to give this man this fence, you could fix it on your side so you don't have to see it. Just like eventually his trees will grow to maturity and they will cover the fence and probably solve the problem over time. But in the meantime, each of you are looking at each other. So, Mr. Eisner.
From what I've been listening to, the one way that you both could solve this dilemma is the 3 or 4 sections that you're both agreeing on. You possibly should just take out the 6 foot with the 2 foot extension and put in a proper 8 foot fence with the proper 4x4 posts. And both of you should be in agreement. One has the privacy and one has the security. Is that what I'm not hearing or hearing?
So, Mr. Eisner, while I appreciate
Yeah,
your
that's
attempt
not
to try
our
and
purview.
assist the 2 neighbors in solving their problem, that is not what's before you today.
So
The
now we go to
property owner-
rebuttal. Is that correct?
Well, I would say if there's any other members of the public, I believe there was a hand in the audience.
Oh, yes.
before.
My apologies, please.
You're
Please
gonna
come to
have
the microphone, state your name and address for the record. I know you have to go through the labyrinth to get to it.
And then once you get there, I'll just swear you in. Address?
My name is Mary Jane Royce. My address is 1107 Connecticut Road in Tarpon Springs.
Okay, and if you could raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
It is.
Thank you.
I came here because I live on Connecticut Road, which is the street behind Rose Tree Lane. And someone recently moved in behind me. And as the gentleman who's requesting the variance mentioned, I have full view of my new neighbors, and I don't want that. They have pretty much full view of my main living area. I'm sure they're not thrilled with that. We have a fence. I really thought this was going to more impact me, yet it's down the street. Those two streets have different elevations for almost every house. It's kind of crazy. It's old neighborhood and new neighborhood. And my opinion, is strictly an opinion, is I think that when a house is permitted and built, we should have the expectation that we can provide privacy for ourselves and our family. So if, because of the elevations, he's losing 2 feet and he needs a 2-foot extension, my opinion is I would agree with it because that's the fishbowl that I live in. And I might come back and ask for a 2-foot extension. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we go to rebuttal. Is that correct?
If there's nobody else wishing to speak.
Is there anyone else in the inner space, outer space world? What do we got online? Anything more?
Am I able to say something?
And who are we talking to?
Adam, the actual the
We'll
owner.
give you a minute, sir. We're going to give you rebuttal. Just make certain there's no more.
We do not have anyone else in attendance online.
Thank you for that. And now, sir, your rebuttal.
So yes, Mr. DeClaire is correct. We had an agreement prior to the holidays. I had a lot of family come in town for the holidays, and he did agree to let me put up some panels for some privacy. Now, Mr. DeClaire does not live there. He rents those houses out, that house out itself. So I'm not really sure why it's that big of a deal to him. As you can go over to his property now, his tenants have put up a black sheet in their patio because they are tired of looking at me and vice versa. As for the trees, yes, the trees are growing only so much because they don't have the room to grow because of how close they are to the fence. And the reason why we had to do that is because when we built the house, we had a plan of where the elevation was supposed to be. Well, closer to everything, once everything got completed, there was a flag thrown with the city saying, we're going to have an issue with drainage from your neighbor from the north and the east. We need to bring your house up. We need to build a swale, and then so it goes into the retention pond. When the swale came in, that's when it lowered everything, and we could only put the trees on the tree line of where the swale came back up on the end. We couldn't put the trees in the swale, is what the city told us. So that's why they're so close to the fence. They're only going to grow so wide because the fence is not allowing that. As for the privacy, I really don't understand the issue with a little bit of privacy. He does not live there, he rents it. And like I said before, his renters, I'm guessing, feel uncomfortable because there is a black sheet up. As for it being going back to where you guys were saying about the stability of the actual add-on, it's not 2 feet, it is a little over a foot, and that structure is very sound. It should not have any issues. If a hurricane came, I don't think anyone would be here to begin with, and that whole fence would be gone. There's things in people's properties around Tarpon Springs that would fly before this fence would fly. I'm not really understanding the rebuttal on his side of a little bit of privacy for his renters, and for me that I also pay taxes here too. I want to have a little bit of privacy in my own home, and I don't have that. And when going back to the fence being up, yes, he is the one that said we could put the 4 panels up, and then after Christmas, then we'll figure out something else. He wanted us to bring dirt in to lift the fence up to give me more of a fence. Well, that won't work because that will go against the swale that's back there. So that won't work. There's no other option other than putting in somewhat of an extension or another fence. But at that point, I don't think he's going to split the cost of me putting a whole new fence in.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any further
Oh,
questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. And one more thing, going back to the screen and enclosure that he brought up. The city, I went to permitting for that. The city will not allow that because of my 30-foot setback. There is no, I could put a screen in, but by that point, it would cost me thousands of dollars. The quotes I got were anywhere between $8,000 to $10,000 just for privacy. I can't afford that.
Any questions of the applicant? Okay, we're going to go for a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? Are we going for roll call?
I
We
have a
good?
discussion.
What?
My discussion is going to be, I kind of could agree with an 8-foot fence for privacy. I just can't agree with the 2-foot extension on a 6-foot.
Okay, so to that point, he's only asking for a 2-foot variance for a fence. It still has to go through permitting. So whether or not the city allows you to have a 2-foot extension or to replace it with an 8-foot fence is going to be per code, and that'll have to go through permitting and be inspected. So
That answers my question.
there you go.
Got to read the fine print, Mr. Rice.
Thank you, thank
We're,
you.
we're going for roll call.
For the one time, I'm making this easier. This is great.
Ms. Rich,
Yes.
Mr. Eisner,
Yes.
Mr. Burris,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Approve.
Mr. Abowski.
Yes. Congratulations, sir. You have your
Fence.
2 feet.
Get to go to permitting.
Good permitting.
All right. Fantastic. So now we're going to move on to application number 20-161, variance to reduce the required side yard setback, location 1711 Avoca Drive. City.
Okay, sharing my screen again. Okay. This property again is located off of Avoca Drive, outlined in yellow. The property and properties to the east, west, and north are zoned R100. To the south, the properties are zoned R100A, but these are both single-family residential districts. The applicant is proposing to construct a new pool screen enclosure around their existing pool. That pool was installed back in 1978. They're here today requesting a reduction in the side setback for that enclosure to allow it to be 5 feet 10 inches from the east property line. The land development code requires a minimum side setback of 8 feet. This is a look at the site plan. The red line is showing the layout of the proposed pool screen enclosure. And then the blue shape on the screen is where the existing pool is located. The land development code does have specific setback standards in regards to pools and pool screen enclosures. The side setback, again, the minimum is 8 feet. They are proposing the 5 foot 10 inch setback from the east property line. The code requires the rear setback of an enclosure to be a minimum of 5 feet. They will meet that minimum requirement from the rear property line. And then there is a setback requirement between the pool water edge to the enclosure, and that is a minimum of 3 feet, and they will be meeting that as well. And according to the applicant, the need for the variance is due to that 3 foot separation between the water and the enclosure. And here are your standards, and I can answer any questions.
Any questions from Mr. Boris or Ms. Rich?
Not from me. At this time.
Vice Mayor, any questions for the city staff?
Chair.
Oh, yeah, Vice Chair. Not yet, not
I
yet.
got a major promotion
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Promotion.
Well, your role. I don't know if this may be a question for the applicant. I know sometimes when we're looking at these pool screen enclosures, particularly, with the setback from the water's edge, is this variance request coming because they need to build there's not an existing screen enclosure now and they're building a new one? Or is it sometimes, they've outlived their lifespan and we're replacing?
This is a new enclosure.
A new enclosure. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
So my question of staff is, we run into this exact particular variance numerous times. So why would there not be a 11-foot setback from a pool, which I know this is back in 78, but what is the rules and regulations for putting in a pool, because we do know it's a given to be 3 feet from the water's edge to the cage. So we could run into this consistently if we keep putting pools in with, with a 5-foot setback, and then all of a sudden it turns into an 11-foot setback because we're adding a cage. I mean, most people do add a cage, maybe not on the onset because of costs. They put a pool in, then they say, okay, the bugs are eating them, and they want to go and put a cage in. So is there a setting for a setback for putting a pool in that would incorporate the use of a cage down the road, is my question.
So how the land development code is written now, it has setbacks for just the pool, and there's also setbacks if there's an enclosure. Not all pools have enclosures, so I think that is where the intent behind having different setback requirements came from. So just so you guys know, the minimum setback for a pool to the side lot line is 8 feet, and then that's measured from the water's edge also. So if someone wanted to have the pool enclosure and their pool, they built it today, you'd have to, the closest it could be to the property line and meet code is 11 feet.
So that makes all of these come before this board when people decide to put in a cage afterwards.
Well, depending on where the pools are on the property.
And when the house.
And when the house was built and the pool was
This-
built.
Yeah,
yes.
this pool was constructed in 1978. So
Yeah.
Right, I understand.
they've waited quite some time since.
And honestly, I don't really have anything with this. I'm just asking if there's, could be a change in where you put the pool in with the anticipation that it wouldn't hit our board. That's all.
So it sounds like there is, so the next generation of our board will not have these skinny
This is something we can look
situations.
at when we go through updates.
Okay, Mr. Boris.
Yes, can you put up the topographic survey again?
Sure. Okay, just want to make sure.
Up there, where the X is, minimum 8 feet.
Yes.
On the paperwork we got is 7 feet.
That was a clarification we made with the applicant. He was under the impression that the requirement was only 7-foot setback, and we just let him know that it's actually a variance it's supposed to be 8 feet.
Thank you.
But he did clarify that the 5 foot, 10 inches is what his setback would be.
Thank you.
Eagle eye. Okay, so we're going to go to the applicant. Do we have the owner, Guy Danes, present?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yes,
Anything you have to present, we're happy to hear it.
just like Mr. Eisner was saying, this was my childhood home. I grew up there, and then when my parents passed away recently over the last couple of years, we've taken it, we're trying to renovate it. And they didn't use the pool because of the bugs, because if you look at the map, the 4 lots behind us have always been empty ever since I've been there back, 77. And so the bugs are incredible back there. We've tried different, pest control places to come out and spray, since the city doesn't spray for mosquitoes, and nothing works. I mean, even in the middle of the day, you can't even clean the pool without just coming back with welts all over you. So that's our reason for doing it. And then unfortunately, because the pool is so close to the side, and that we're just making it to where it'll just fit the 3, code for the screen to the pool. And unfortunately, it goes over about 1.10 feet, I think.
Okay. So do we have any questions for our applicant, Vice Chair?
No.
Joanne? Mr. Board?
No, thank you.
Mr. Eisner? Okay, well, that makes it easy. Do we have any emails from the public? Anyone in the public want to speak out in the audience here? How about in cyberspace?
We do not have anyone in attendance at this time.
So if there's no further objection, we go for a motion.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Ms. Rich,
Approve.
Eisner,
Yes.
Mr. Burris,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Approve.
Mr. Urbowski.
Yes. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Get us.
All right. So we're going to go on to approval of minutes. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Ms. Rich,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Burris,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Approve.
Mr. Obowski.
And so then we're going to move on to item number 3, organizational meeting, election of chair and vice chair. I nominate Jackie Turner for chair.
Second.
Any other nominations for chair?
I nominate our chair, Mr. Urbowski.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, okay.
We love this
Any
game.
any other nominations for chair? And the alternates may participate as well, so.
Join in the fun.
Okay, hearing no other nominations, the nominations are closed. All in favor of Mr. Urbowski as chair, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 1, 2, 3, 4. All for our vice chair to be elevated to chair, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
1, 2. Mr. Urbowski, you have yet another year.
I'm holding out for vice mayor.
As honored chair of the Board of
I know I
Adjustment.
am. I mean, I was.
So I nominate Jackie Turner for vice chair.
Is there a second?
Oh, I'll second that.
Any other nominations for vice chair?
Crickets.
Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No one
And
wants
the
to put
ayes
up with
have it.
Urbowski.
Ms. Turner, you are our esteemed vice chair. And the election is closed until next year.
There you go.
Okay,
Very
so
good.
now we move on to staff comments.
I have no comments this evening.
Get out of town.
None.
All right. How about board comments? What do we got?
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Anything
Second,
else?
Third.
Any other comments? I have a few questions of our attorney.
Oh.
So we have a process in quasi judicial hearings of swearing in speakers. If the speaker does not tell the truth after being sworn in and is saying something that's demonstrably false, what is the mechanism for holding that person accountable?
There is none. So, okay, I can't say there is none.
Wow.
So,
I was like, oh, well, it's a good thing we do that then.
so keep in mind, this is not a court of law. You don't have a mechanism like perjury where there's any type of civil contempt or criminal contempt ramifications where they get put in jail. They've taken an oath. It's on their honor whether or not they are going to tell the truth. Now, just like any other court of law, you have the ability to judge their credibility. So if the evidence is presented that retorts their representations, you then get to say, okay, well, what is the more credible of the two pieces of evidence? Do I believe this person's testimony over this person's testimony? Do I believe this physical record over this person's testimony, or vice versa? So it's up to you to weigh the credibility of the evidence that's before you. Some of the things this evening were very clear cut, that there was a yes and a no, there was a right and a wrong, there was a truth and a mistruth, is the way I'll say it. But other than that, it's basically you need to use your credibility judgment. I don't have the authority to say, let's call the sheriff and, get them locked away. So.
Understood.
It did really bother me, and I almost asked a question similar to that during the speech, because when we ask someone a question and they answer and then we find out they didn't answer truthfully, it didn't change how I voted, but it really upset me, that the person would do that after taking that oath. But again,
Keep in mind too, that when somebody's presenting evidence, a lot of the people that we have before this board are lay people. So you're asking them questions. Some of them might be nervous. Some of them might misspeak. Some of them
That
might
I totally understand.
misunderstand the question. But that's why you guys sit in a position, I'm not going to say of power, but in a position of judgment. And, it is up to you to determine the quality of and the credibility of the evidence that's presented to you, and to weigh that against, whether it is enough to meet the criteria. So especially with regard to testimony, there's going to be opposing sides on a lot of things, especially by and between neighbors. So you just got to take it for what it's worth and figure out which is the more credible of
Yes,
those.
and I have a handle on. So then it moves to the next point. If the person is an expert and they say something that's not true, are they accountable in any way?
So first, they have to be qualified as an expert. They have to prove that they have the credentials to be so. So
Let's say they've done that, then they,
if say there's a developer that comes in here and puts an engineer before you, puts their resume here before you, and they make representations, the cities, and if the city had an engineer and it came and it made different representations, the math fleshed out differently, same answer. You're here to determine the credibility. There's no ramifications. It's the court of public opinion. Their reputation is what they have. That's all outside the purview of this board, and anything that we can do to remedy that.
okay.
And keep in mind too, that comes out on the record. So if any of these things get appealed and a judge sitting in judgment sees that, the judge can make those comments too. And then in a civil court, in an appellate stature, there certainly can be other ramifications, but likely not. I mean, the ramifications are, it's quite obvious that there's an untruth and that person loses credibility.
So if a case was appealed, that could be some evidence that would be used to justify the appeal, that someone that was an expert actually said something demonstrably false.
Well, yes. So the record is the record, one way or the other. The thing that's going to be appealed is your order based on your findings of fact and your conclusions of law, based on the competent, substantial evidence that's presented. If you've got two competing experts' opinions and one of them is demonstrably false, then the appellate court is going to see what you saw, and there's going to be a credibility issue, and the court is going to say, no, there was not a miscarriage of justice here. They made the right decision based on the criteria and the evidence presented.
Okay. Anything else?
We learn something new every day.
Every day. I have more, but it escapes me. So next time, we'll
Take a list.
go
I'm
down
happy
that
to
road.
answer them.
Do we have a meeting next month?
Yes.
We do.
There's one
Okay.
piece.
So then I guess we will see one
So
another
Maybe not. I think we passed the deadline.
again.
24th.
My only thing I wanted to say
Please.
was I kind of asked pretty clearly whether that extension was up or down. And I got a definitive, no, it's down, and it's been down a while.
All I can say in the defense of that man is I think that he may have thought that you were talking about the specific ones that the guy was pissing and moaning about, because there were ones that guy was okay with, and maybe those he didn't think were being objected to. And so they had agreed that those were okay to be up, right? So that's the only defense I can come up with. But I don't know if that's the case. I mean, it certainly is. It's a head scratcher. But, it seemed like a gotcha thing. Like the guy doesn't even live in that house back there. And he was just like, ooh, I'm going to get this guy for adding on to his fence, even though it benefited him, actually, because his renters now don't have this issue of privacy either, right? But he just seemed like, that was just my take on it. So now that we can discuss.
Good fences build good neighbors.
Yes, and so I hope that they can work things out in the future. That's really what it comes down to. Because
I agree.
the guy ought not to be throwing stones, because I don't know if that shed is permitted or is, so on, and he's renting. So he ought not to be.
Exactly what code enforcement does all day long.
So anyhow, people ought to just work it out. Sounds like they tried for a bit. It didn't and wound up here. So with that, we will adjourn at 8:22.
Right.